Hey everyone. Sorry about the delay getting started. Sometimes I have technical issues on my part. Dave, I'm so glad you made it. I was getting so nervous counting down the minutes.
Yes, I was wondering if I was going to get done or not. I just finished a webinar and was trying to rush into here, and it didn't give us time to get everything set up like we normally do. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I went through and I prepared the whole song and dance. I got everything set up, but you showed up. So now I just got to change everything, which is great.
I was hoping you had some jokes or something. I could just wait and I'd listen on the other side to the jokes and what you were telling everybody.
No, I was breaking down the retirement statistics for 2021. So I was getting ready to dive deep, but I'm glad you came on because now you revived everyone from having to put up with me for a whole 30 minutes by myself.
Well, that would be an interesting discussion. Definitely, when we look at statistics, especially in retirement, a lot to learn from what's going on in America right now.
Exactly. Well, we want to welcome everyone here that's joining us live. Hopefully my audio is okay. Hopefully the internet. We've had some crazy issues once in a while. But before we get started in this, Dave, I don't see the normal background. Where are you today?
I am in Utah today. I'm in our home in Utah here, getting ready this week for my daughter's wedding.
Wow. So it sounds like every time I talk to you, it's always a different area. So it's always fun to see how you can jump on and entertain us all the time.
Yeah, I just wish we had a little better backdrops. I'm so used to the nice one I've got at home and the nice one you've got there. I wish I could just bring a portable one that I could fold out of my suitcase and put up when we get to these places. But it is what it is. We're here. We're ready to answer questions and excited to be with everybody.
And if you're watching live, go ahead and submit your retirement questions. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know anything we can help with when it comes to retirement. That's why we have Dave here. What we do is I prepare a series of questions I throw at Dave, and I also will grab the questions from you watching live on Facebook and YouTube, and we get to ask those to Dave. So Dave, before we get started, I'm going to preface this by saying today we're going to talk about two topics. The first one is the power of zero. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up a question with that. So that way you know exactly what we're talking about versus just throwing everything at you and saying, hey, figure out where it came from.
Hey, no worries. No worries. Happy to answer whatever we can.
Okay, Dave, to start out with, I have Deborah. She's asking, what adjustments need to be made for rentals?
Where Deborah's question is coming from, when we talk about the power of zero, we're talking about getting the appropriate amount in each of the three buckets that we use in our planning: taxable bucket, tax deferred bucket, and tax free bucket. Well, for most people, they're able to leave something in that tax deferred bucket because for many people, if we do the planning appropriately, the only income they're going to have outside of theirs is their Social Security that's going to have any tax to it. What she's asking is saying, hey, if I've got rental property where I'm going to have rental income coming in every year, can I keep the same amount in that tax deferred bucket as I would otherwise be able to do if I didn't have the rental income? And the answer is no. And she realizes that by saying, what type of adjustment? Many of you, you're going to have to liquidate that down to zero, depending on how high that rental income is, because what we're trying to avoid is provisional income and the taxation of Social Security. Plus, we don't want to get to a point we get above that standard deduction.
And Dave, we've talked about rentals many times on the show. In fact, you even have a podcast about it. How do you feel about rentals in retirement, or maybe as we're getting to the door of retirement?
If you're concerned about tax rate risk, the best way you can own rentals, in my opinion, the only way you should own rentals is in a self-directed retirement account. And it would be a Roth-based account, because self-directed is going to allow you to own rental property, it allows you to own non-traditional assets. But outside of there, what's going to happen is you are going to end up paying tax not only on that income, but also on your Social Security. And if you're comparing someone who didn't have to pay tax on their Social Security versus someone who did, your tax rate's going to skyrocket because now you're paying on tax on money you didn't have to. And you're going to find that for many people have run out of money 5 to 7 years faster because of the fact they did have to pay that tax.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. Dave, I've got Gary jumping on this morning, and he said, good morning, Dave and CR. Just finished listening to Dave on the Biden proposals. Congratulations also on your daughter's wedding.
Gary, thank you very much. Very excited. It's the first one. I've got 6 children, so we should be having plenty more. But this is the first wedding we've had. We're very excited about it. The young man sharing is my kidney donor son. So we're really very excited about that. Know the family, excited to be closer connected and hopefully be able to spend more and more time together.
Dave, as we're looking at this also, you go from a webinar to live shows. How do you squeeze all this in right now?
So sometimes it's difficult. That's one of the challenges, especially when you're looking on a virtual side, because it's not like when you're in an office situation and you've got a secretary or an assistant that can go out and say, hey, Dave's running a couple of minutes late. He'll be there. Just be patient. Here, you can't really do that. So like you had no idea, was I going to show up exactly on time? Was I going to be 5 minutes late? And that happens all the time. Now with webinars, you really don't want that to happen, or it creates major issues. But I see it with meetings and everything else. As we stack our schedule, it can be a little challenging, but it works. We do our best, and hopefully we don't keep people waiting more than a minute or two, and on with their need, helping them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish.
All right, Dave, let's jump down to Cynthia. And she's asking, at what age do we need to get a life insurance retirement plan?
Depending on your situation. Now, if you're young and the only money you have is enough to pay for a life insurance retirement plan and no other retirement investment, generally I'm going to recommend that you put your money into the stock market and get a higher rate of return, because you need some growth. Now, as we get older, and usually somewhere in our 40s to 50s, even into our 60s, we can get these products. But somewhere around mid 40s, we really need to start looking at this, because if we don't, we're going to have some issues. If we have health issues like I did with my kidneys, maybe uninsurable at a certain point, you're also going to get to a point once we get into the late 60s and 70s where it may be too expensive. So mid 40s, usually you've been able to get some good growth off the market. And again, what we want is it to be a portion of your retirement, not your only retirement. And usually what we do is use it for the bond portion of your retirement portfolio.
Dave, we get this question so many times on this show, not only here, I'm sure you get it on your webinars. Why do we have this question that comes up probably more than anything I've seen on the show?
Because people know so little about it. I mean, that's really where the biggest problem is when we look at these products. And the LIRP is life insurance retirement plan, but people misunderstand it, and they've had bad experiences because they didn't understand and they ended up getting sold something they shouldn't have, or they maybe tried to do it themselves and just didn't understand. So we see a number of things. I was talking to a gentleman, and he's open to the strategies we present. But he says, look, I got to tell you a story 20 years ago where I got taken advantage of in some of the products that you guys use in your planning. So I'm going to be skeptical. And I said, good. We want people to be skeptical of what we do, because that means you'll ask questions and allow us to help you understand what we're doing, because there's nothing we do that we're trying to hide. And it's important you understand what we're trying to propose so that you can use it effectively for your own retirement situation.
And Dave, let's take that example, because let's say we talk about annuities 20 years ago versus today. There's a difference. I mean, there's a difference in what you're teaching, the philosophy as well.
There definitely is. There's a substantial difference in the products and the way they're being used, in the fee structure of the product. They continue to evolve like everything does. They continue to get better. They continue to offer more products. And this gentleman, he had the same issue I did. Now, he had it with annuity. I had it with life insurance. Ended up buying the product right before the crash in 2020, when the dot-com crash happened. So the market had been doing great. Unfortunately, the time we both bought was after it gone off and gotten all the benefits. So then we buy it, it goes down substantially. They're variable products, which we generally don't recommend for most people when we get into these principal protected area. We want them to have the protection. If the market goes down, they don't lose money. But if you look at the 2000 CR, it was a lost decade. So from what you had in 2000 going into, you didn't gain anything. And then many of those products had fees associated with them, which many of the products today don't. There's no fees attached to many of these. So then you lost the 20s, 10, and then up to 2020, you're getting your fees back. And he mentioned on his side, he says, look, I just barely broke even after 20 years in this. And mine, after 3 to 4 years, I realized at age 65, my insurance was going to lapse. So I just let the money go. But these are things we're trying to prevent from happening. And that's why we teach what we teach. And that's why we use the products we use. But unfortunately, these products fall within the guidelines of the insurance industry. So if people don't understand them, and the fact that they're going to be subject to market risk if they don't use the right products, it can become a real big issue.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Dave, let me bring up Gary's question here. He's got another question for you. what do you think about the cash balance pension plan, a hybrid plan integrating the characteristics of both the 401k and the defined benefit pension plan?
Gary, good question. In general, I'm not against it for the right people. Now, again, you've got to look at these things and can we get money in there in a Roth environment, or are they at such a high income level that maybe it's not going to matter so much for them? Although that being said, even if you're in a 37% bracket now and expecting to stay there, hey, I would recommend you transfer every dollar you could right now, because I don't think you'll see a day in the future where your income, your tax is going to be less. So those are the things I'd be concerned about, Gary, especially when we talk about defined benefit pension plans, where you're going to get a set amount of money, like a pension going in retirement. Maybe some better options, but may not be as well, depending on their income structure and how much money they're trying to get set aside for their future. It may work well for them.
And if you're watching like Gary, if you had a question, go ahead and submit that either on YouTube or Facebook, and we'll go ahead and get that answered when we take a break between the other questions. And Gary, hopefully that answers your question. If not, we always expect a good follow-up with you. So, but Dave, let's jump down to Carolyn. So she's asking, how does your advice intersect with wills, revocable life trust or living trust, and other estate planning?
We combine the two. Now, I will tell you, when we look at the insurance side, we're using our insurance completely different than many people are going to use an insurance policy. And again, it's become not so necessary now with the high estate values. Very few Americans are going to be over the 11 million plus per individual and 22 million plus per couple estate value. So historically, though, when I started in the industry, I think that the max was 750 grand, maybe a million. Well, as a result, many of our clients were over the estate tax threshold. So they were putting life insurance in place in these other trusts, especially the irrevocable trust, to pay for the tax consequences. Well, now what we're doing is we're saying, look, retirement's about income for you. Yes, you want to plan for others, but you don't owe anybody anything. You're supposed to live your retirement. Don't pass that opportunity to your kids. Live it yourselves. Take advantage of it. And I know it's hard for savers because you spent your whole life doing nothing so you could save all the money for many people. And now it's that point you can enjoy it, and you can't get yourself to get out off the couch and go do it. Well, our recommendation is to do it, but we recommend you get with an estate planner with everything we do, that you put a living trust for sure in place for everyone, so that they have some certainty in what's going to happen with any assets that are left. But we are using ours to solve income issues and long-term care issues, not so much to just solve a death benefit. And if you want death benefit, hey, let's set up a separate policy and fund it and make sure you have that available. But that product you probably should never touch. You should let it just continue to grow, and realize that the money you put in there is truly designed as a death benefit for your beneficiaries.
And Dave, being a CPA, you also dive into a lot. I mean, it's getting more legally, but we get into estate planning. And I think that's one thing you've been very aware of, and you're trying to help people solve more problems. As we bring up estate planning, tell me how that relates to maybe retirement in a way that people don't usually use this. Like you said, sometimes it's about saving for ourselves and not our children, which is a concept most people aren't familiar with.
I'll tell you an interesting story. This was probably about a decade ago. I was living in Las Vegas. We had a client that was extremely wealthy, and he hated two groups of people, the IRS and attorneys. He absolutely hated. And so he spent his whole career doing everything he could not to pay either one of those. He would use us as accountants to try to help him. He'd use his friends, anybody he could when he needed advice. If there was a legal situation, he would try to do it all himself. And then he did everything he could to minimize his taxes. Well, guess what, CR? He never put a trust or anything in place for himself. So when he died, guess who the two people were that got everything he owned? The attorneys, the IRS.
Yeah.
And as I look at that, that is one of the things that we've got to look at. And we look at these retirements, is we're putting them together so we can take the risk of these other agencies doing with our retirement what they choose to do, or an attorney, as you go through probate, doing with your retirement as they choose to do, versus you being able to choose what you want to happen and then being able to give it to those beneficiaries, whether it's your kids or a charity or whoever it might be, that can enjoy those for the rest of their lifetime.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And Dave, I'm going to come back over to Gary here. I love these questions that keep coming in. And Gary, I appreciate these as well. He said, my 39-year-old daughter, Melissa, asked me a question which I was unsure of the answer. She asked me, given a choice, with the finite amount of funds, should I invest my retirement funds in a mega backdoor Roth IRA through my employer or an IUL life insurance retirement plan?
I think the thing you got to look at here on your side, Gary, and on her side is how's that portfolio diversified? I mean, if you're looking at a situation and she's got some other assets, obviously, if she's doing a mega backdoor Roth, she's been able to put other investments into her 401k. But how's she diversified? Because in a traditional investment portfolio, you've got stocks and bonds, and you're using those to help ensure that if the stock market drops, hopefully you don't lose 30, 40% of your portfolio. Well, when you look at the life insurance retirement plan, what we're doing is taking the bonds out of that portfolio. In theory, I mean, we're not taking bonds because IULs use options, not bonds, but we're taking that and putting it in a more productive vehicle that's going to have a better rate of return. So what you've done is you've said, okay, I principal protected this for my bond portion. I'm getting a better rate of return. Now I can invest my stock market and know that at the end of the day, I got a better result. So I think that's what you got to look at. If she doesn't have any other principal protected assets, my recommendation would be to put that money into a life insurance retirement plan. At her age, yeah, she's only going to need about 40% of her retirement principal protected, but she should still have 40% of her retirement principal protected. And as you know, Gary, I mean, many of these IULs you can get, again, depending on where you're at. I mean, I'm seeing many of them, maybe it's as low as 4.5%, but I'm seeing many of them, they're 6.5% and 7%.
Great advice. And Dave, I was going to just ask you and have you, because yesterday we were talking just casually like we do about the mega backdoor Roth. And it's very interesting that Jamie jumps on and she said, I'm familiar with the backdoor Roth, but what is a mega backdoor Roth, Dave?
Jamie, I wish that Gary could speak right now because I'd let him answer this question. He's a man that I believe studied it quite extensively. But this is where you're taking your 401k plan, and there's got to be provisions that allow for pre-tax money that's already been taxed going into that 401k plan. And then you're maxing it up to the $58,000 threshold that's allowed to put into this, and then immediately transferring it out into a Roth. So applies for a certain group of people. Again, if you work for yourself and you can control those retirement plans, it can be a great option to get sometimes $20,000, $30,000 into a Roth environment that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. But you do have to meet a number of criteria. And if you work for a large company, unless they've already gotten in place, they're probably not going to incur the cost that would require to amend the plan to allow you to do these type of transactions.
And I don't want to spill the beans totally, Dave, but I heard you may have a podcast or two coming about this soon.
I do. This Friday's podcast is going to be on this backdoor IRAs mega conversion. So yes, if you want to learn more, I would recommend that this Friday the podcast comes out. You'll be able to listen and better understand how they work. And
Dave, maybe we could get Gary on to talk about some of those with you too. Maybe,
yeah, maybe like I said, maybe I just have Gary do the show. I appreciate his knowledge and how the information he has on all these topics. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Again, thank you for the questions as you're continually watching. If you have questions about retirement or anything else, I mean, we're talking about some great topics here. Again, if we get into long-term care or Medicare, we get into Social Security, reverse mortgages, all of these are so critical to our retirement. But as we talk about Social Security, Dave, as we dive into all these elements, we always come up to the point that people are retiring at the wrong age. And maybe it's because of other reasons, financial or disability, but there's a lot of people who are just doing it just because they don't know any better.
Yeah, it definitely happens. And I think probably more so than retiring at the wrong age, they retire and make the decisions at the wrong age. Mm-hmm. So for example, hey, you may be at a point that you've got enough money, you can retire at age 62. Many clients that are at that point. But then they think, oh, I've got to immediately take my Social Security. And I've got one client, I tell the story many times, that thought he was getting back the government. I'm going to get the maximum dollars I can, so I'm going to start at the earliest age I possibly can. Well, even at this point, he's outlived what that would be, and he's got a wife 20 years younger than him that's dependent upon those benefits. So she would go on probably for another 20 years. But when you look at that, it's like, okay, you didn't solve your problem. So it's really making the wrong decisions once you choose to retire. And it's part of our job is to help you do that. Now, yes, you're right, CR. There are those that are retiring at the wrong time, that are just done with work and don't realize that. I had an uncle that was that way. He was just done. He just said he couldn't take it anymore. Well, he retires, but he didn't have enough money to get him through retirement. So 5 years later, he's like, I got to go back to work. Well, he had $100,000 a year government job. He wasn't getting that back.
Mhm.
So now he's looking at going into Home Depot or somewhere else to work that's going to pay him 20, 30 grand a year. And it's a problem. I mean, when people do that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think one of the things we have to deal with is you could take anyone that wants to retire early in their 40s, the late 40s, all the way up to people, like you said, are taking it at the wrong time. But yeah, that's why we're here, obviously, to educate and bring awareness to this. And
And I will tell people again, as hard as life is, and I get that it's difficult, and I get we get tired, and that it's tough, and that we want to give up, and we want to get out of where we're at. If you can last the 5 years going into retirement, if you can work those versus the last 5 years of your life, complete difference. You'll be so grateful that you did it the first 5 years rather than at age 85, 90, even 80, trying to go out and get some type of job that's going to pay you enough to really supplement your Social Security and any potential other income you might have.
yeah, I think that's great advice. Dave, I have one from Robert here who's asking, why should income from a required minimum distribution not exceed the standard deduction?
The reason is because of two things. Number one is we want to ensure that that's not taxable. We're trying to get you to a 0% tax bracket because, again, there's no 1%, 2%. The closest to it's a 10% bracket. And if taxes double, that becomes 20. And if you live in a state, that may become 25 or 30, depending on what state taxes do. So that's why, number one, why we don't want to get above that standard deduction. Number two, if you do, you've gotten to a point for almost all of you, your Social Security is going to be taxable for sure. If you've got that much income coming out, because again, if you look at a CR, we say even now for a retired couple, if your standard deduction somewhere around 27,000, well, if you then add and realize that for a single person, 25,000 is the starting threshold for your Social Security being taxed, and for a married couple, which to get the 27,000 standard deduction, they would have to make, well, that's 32 grand. So your Social Security can only be 5,000 before you start having some taxation on your Social Security. So, and again, once you get out of that initial phase and your Social Security starts getting taxed, you're getting double taxed along the whole side. And I tell that story too. Client that was in the 40% bracket thought he was going to give his mom money who was on Social Security and save money. Well, by the time you took the effect Social Security had on this income, she was in a 50+% bracket.
That's why it's important to sit down with an advisor, right? Because what you're telling me is that there's some choices that were made that obviously weren't the right choice.
And people do it all the time. I had a situation the other day that I was meeting with a lady that her ex-husband had passed away. And she's at a point where luckily she's only 1 year past the deadline, and she had been working to where she could have gotten these benefits. So they would have been phased out, but she had no idea she could get survivor spouse benefits and then let her Social Security grow. So she's asked me, hey, what do I do? Should I start my Social Security now or not? And I said, hey, look, you can get these benefits. And she's like, what are you talking about? Well, CR, based upon her situation, it was like $60,000 to $80,000 she was going to be able to get off of this situation that she was just going to leave on the table because she didn't know.
And that was one phone call from you, just for a no fee consultation. She sat down and figured that out.
Yeah. And to some level, I mean, if she didn't do it, ignorance is bliss. I mean, that's one of the challenges. Luckily, she was a point she could still get it. The ones I hate is when you get to a point that for 5 years, they could have been collecting that money and they weren't. And you're now finally telling them, hey, the government had a bunch of money that they would have given you, but you didn't know it was there. And now they're not going to go back and give it to you because you waited too long.
Yeah, that's why education is so critical. That's why we're here, Dave. And again, letting everyone know we're talking about the power of zero. Dave recently had a webinar on this. And what we do is we kind of gathered some of the questions that were our popular ones from this. And Dave, one of the ones that came in from Todd, he said, does this work for a higher income person?
It does to a level. Now, again, if you look at it from your side, many times we can only get you to a tax efficient situation. Now, if you're a high income earner, again, you could be in a situation you're in 37% bracket and you're never going to get out of that. And if you had stocks and bonds, now most people are in those brackets, usually have real estate and other things. I mean, you could do those conversions now and still get yourself in 0% bracket and be making hundreds of thousands of dollars through your Roth accounts in retirement. So it does work. I mean, if nothing else, we're at least reducing the risk. We may not be able to eliminate it, but we can substantially reduce the risk by using the right time to transfer and move money to help you get to where you need to be.
And Dave, you just came off your webinar talking about President Biden and the potential changes of things that are happening there. If we're talking about high income earners, how does this affect it as we get into what you talked about earlier in your webinar?
Well, what we find is, and even for a middle income earner, I mean, they're after the high income earners, and that's someone over $400,000, which when we look at it, I mean, that's not even our top brackets as we look at it for a married couple in our day. I mean, they go into the 600 plus $1,000. So to some level, you're not the super rich when you're in that point. But again, 2026, those already go up. And that's already just said. That's not, somebody saying, hey, we've got to increase those. So yeah, if you're in that high bracket and expect to stay there, I don't see ever a day that your taxes are going down. Now, the lower and middle income earners, yeah, maybe it'll take a while before they go up. And obviously for the lower earners, they don't have much to give. But somebody's got to pay the taxes that are coming as a result of our overspending.
Mm-hmm. And Gary brought up, it looks like you had another webinar yesterday with Tom Hagna. It was Paychecks and Playchecks. And Gary says that Tom Hagna said yesterday that one should consider annuities at any age.
He did. Yeah. And as you look at it, the average person that's going to buy an annuity is probably in their 50s or 60s. But again, in the right situation, annuities can work extremely well no matter what age you're in, because they are designed similar. They're principal protected if they're done correctly. Now, you can do variable annuities where you've got the benefits of the variable annuities that can do quite well, and you're going to have the downside of the market if the market goes down. But he's right. And Tom, for those that don't know Tom is one of the top educators in the retirement industry. And we've had the privilege to do a webinar with him. We're going to do right now 3 additional webinars on different topics we've got scheduled. And then we'll see from there. We may do 2 or 3 other joint webinars on different things. But it is, these products you can consider at an early age if you're in the right situations.
And Dave, do you think this will help Gary's daughter, Melissa, at 39 years old?
Yeah, if you look at it on our side, again, what I would look at, I think for her, and I don't know all the situations, again, I would really start looking at a life insurance retirement plan, because the death benefits, the performance on those are going to be very similar to most annuities. Now, again, we've got some right now that are hitting 8% on a fixed index side, so you're not subject to the market risk. But yeah, I think you've got to look at that for her. I've see people in the 40s doing it all the time, and depending on the income she's got available. But my suggestion would be, first, hit those retirement accounts. Second, get that LIRP put in place. And then third, look at annuities if you need some additional principal protection.
And Dave, talking about that webinar yesterday, Mike jumps on and says the Paychecks and Playchecks webinar was awesome.
Hey, Mike, thank you very much. I just love Tom Hagna. I love what he presents. I love his enthusiasm. You're not going to find very many presenters that have that much enthusiasm, but it kind of, again, if you can imagine 200 to 300 live events per year prior to COVID, 3 or 4 a day. I was talking to him specifically about that the other day, and he says, yeah, I would just, I was on the road. I was on the road 200 plus days. And I was doing 2 to 3 to 4 events a day. I'd drive sometimes 3-4 hours, do a presentation in the morning, jump in the car, drive 3-4 hours, do a presentation in the afternoon or evening, jump back in the car on a plane, fly somewhere else for the next morning, and start it all over again.
So Dave, out of that webinar, what was your favorite part, or something that was kind of your aha moment when you were working with Tom yesterday?
I think the biggest thing that I look at is how closely aligned we are. And I talked a little bit about this in the webinar, so Mike will be familiar with this. But when I got started doing the things that I do, I didn't realize how much of my information I originally had to have come from Tom. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I was relying on other people. I was doing a lot of research on the internet. I was trying to figure out, okay, as we look at retirement, what are these risks and what do we need to eliminate? And as I started figuring them out and educating myself on Social Security and Medicare and all these things, what I soon realized once I met Tom is that a lot of his stuff was the same as mine. And obviously he started before I did. So I'm like, wait, these advisors have listened to you, and then I've listened to them. And I guess that was the thing, that we had kindred spirits. Again, he's there to help. That's all he's there to do. I feel like that's my goal, is how do I help educate people so they make better decisions? And to me, that's what it was. As we presented together, it's like, yeah, here's 2 guys that have the same goal. Him a little, I get accused all the time of talking too fast. Well, I tell him I'll never have to worry about it if I'm on a show with you, Tom, because you outdo me.
Yeah, I always talk fast too, so I'm glad to hear that there's steps in that, right? There's always somebody who speaks faster than you.
But I love that he's just put it all together in an environment too that's so logical that people can go through it step by step. Really the goal is to get people to a happy retirement. And he talked about that yesterday. Is we don't need to go into our retirement, frustrated, concerned, worried. Those are years we should be enjoying with either our charities, our kids, our grandkids, doing our hobbies, whatever it is, traveling, whatever we want to do.
And I look forward to those other new podcasts with Tom and you as well as we get going. And again, we have so many varieties of things coming that I'm just really excited for.
I am too. So much great information we've got ahead of you for the rest of the year.
Dave, I've got one more from Shuba here that I wanted to ask you. Is there a growth aspect of the funds if you invest in a life insurance retirement plans?
Shuba, I'm glad you asked this because this is a question that we get asked all the time. And I feel bad in my presentation that I don't address this better because it is something that people have a concern with. They think that they're putting money inside of these accounts and you're just paying for insurance, maybe like a regular policy, term policy where there's nothing else. And then if the money is going in there, that maybe it's being put in a bank account. Well, no, that's not the case. A key aspect of those is we need to have growth. We need them to be productive. That's the first step of a good life insurance retirement plan is we want it to be safe and productive. So yes, there is an investment aspect. And again, if done correctly, what history's proven is they're going to outperform the bond market with a safer environment and the life insurance ability if you were to pass away early that the bond market's never going to give you. So they become a great tool if done correctly. And as a portion of retirement, I think that's the other thing that people always need to remember. Say, please don't dump all of your money into one basket. That isn't at all what you should be doing when you look at your retirement.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And Dave, we're short on time here, but I wanted to thank you for being here, especially taking time as you're continually traveling, and good luck on your daughter's wedding. I mean, how cool is that you have this opportunity coming up? And especially, I love the story that it's your kidney donor son that's marrying your daughter.
Yeah, it's so exciting, and they're so good for each other. It's fun to see them together. I don't think my daughter's wiped the smile off her face for 3 months now because of the excitement of her engagement and everything going on, but very happy for them and great part of life as you see those kids progress and get out on their own and make good decisions and bad decisions and be able to enjoy the benefits and consequences of both as we grow and learn and get better.
And I'd like to thank those who joined us live, especially Jamie, Gary, Mike, for sending questions and comments to us. And we so appreciate you being here on this live version of Ask Dave, because I feel like we have so many questions. And I know Mike alluded to a while back, how some of these questions are helping him as he's going toward retirement, that he's making better choices. And I think that's the whole premise behind everything we do at the end of the day. Are we helping people get closer to retirement? And Dave, you and I talked about this yesterday, that it's in our hearts. It's something we want to do. It's not here just to say, hey, we're here to get a paycheck. It's really here to help people advance and be to a place where they need to be in life.
Yeah, it really is, because every day you are going to get closer to retirement, whether you want to or not. And it's called age, and it's called getting to a point where we just can't work anymore or choose to not work anymore. So as you look at that, there's definitely truth to that. And we want to make that as enjoyable as possible. If I can help you enjoy those years, if I can help you accomplish your dreams and goals because you made better decisions, then I've done my job, and I'm excited that I've been able to be a part of it.
And again, thank you so much for being here. If you have questions, go ahead and submit those at theprosperityguy.com. You can check out all of your upcoming webinars that we have at theprosperityguy.com under the events tab. And if people want to meet with you, Dave, if they go to theprosperityguy.com and click on the strategic session tab at the top, they can fill out a quick survey. It looks like a really short form, like 5 questions, and then they have an opportunity to get into your calendar. So if you want to do that, please take advantage of that. That's why it's there, to help all of those who have questions that are looking to get closer to retirement.
And next week, Changing World of Retirement, our 4-hour course. Encourage we've got a large group. We open the floodgates on this one, and it's got a large group in there, but we're excited about that. We're excited to give that information. If you haven't taken it, it's a great opportunity. The Getting Safely Through Retirement, that's another one that really helps you understand what I do. A lot of the other presentations are subsets to that webinar. It's an hour and a half, but encourage you to check out our website and get that education so you can better understand what you're doing.
And Dave, I was able to work with CPA Academy to get a coupon code because it's tax season, right? Everybody's going through this crazy time. So if you sign up for the Changing World of Retirement, it's normally $80 now to get in because we had such an interest coming into this that we could not fill it all. So we moved over to CPA Academy. And as soon as we did, the charge came. And so with that one, I begged and pleaded and got a discount. So it's only going to last for this one. I'm hoping we can do it for another one, but right now we only have it for this one coming up this Thursday, or I guess next Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm getting my weeks confused, but so next Thursday. And if you go on there, look on the website, it has the coupon or the promo code in there. So when you go click on that and sign up for it, you can use that promo code to get that class for free. Like I said, normally it's $80. So I really am excited about that. And we'll be there next week.
Yeah, you can't ask for more than that. 4 hours of free education at a high level with two guys that have been in the industry for decades and are happy to help you make better decisions.
And I want to bring up one thing before we go, what Brian said, I thought was very valuable. And he said, CR, imagine going to the doctors and you sit down and you say, hey, my arm hurts. I just can't move it. And in walks two doctors to sit down, and they've looked at your x-rays. They've sat down, and both of them together have gone through everything. And they sit down for a couple hours with you and tell you everything. Imagine how powerful that'd be. And that's exactly the same thing that you guys do when we sit down in these 4-hour Changing World of Retirement webinars, where you have both of you that are just so powerful in this realm of retirement that you can sit down and say, hey, let's go over exactly what you need and give that advice. To me, that was just, that was awesome.
So some on this web or on this Facebook Live may have read the book, but there's a book out there that talks about that. And I think I'm going to get it wrong. I better not say the name. I think I know who it is, but it's one of the top authors out there. But he talks about that. He says, why in the airline industry are there so few accidents? Well, because if there's a crash, 50 or 100 or 1,000 people analyze it. They have all the flight records. They see what happened. They try to improve it. Well, why in medicine do we have so many issues? Because so many doctors historically have tried to hide it. And you're right. In Puerto Rico, one of the things I loved about my transplant experience is every morning, a team of like 8 doctors would come to my room and they would openly discuss what was going on. And sometimes they didn't fully agree. And so they would talk back and forth and discuss maybe other scenarios or why one thought they should do this and the others thought they should do that. But that's really what you're getting here. You're getting two guys to look at what's going on and saying, I may say, hey, had you thought about this, Brian? Or Brian, have you thought about this? And both of us are there to really help you make a good decision.
And again, all this can be found at theprosperityguy.com. And we look forward to seeing you again next week as we break down more topics of retirement and again, for all the webinars. So thanks for being here. And Dave, thanks for your time.
You bet. Always a pleasure. Look forward to next week.
All right. We'll see you guys again next week.